So, one of the long-standing myths in the Bulgarian historiography concerning the development of an independent Macedonian nation and identity is that of the so-called Macedonian Bloody Christmas of 1945, or in Bulgarian, the Krvava Koleda. Now, Krvava Koleda essentially states that as part of the Yugoslav process of nation building of the Macedonian people, who up until this point had been proud Bulgars, in order to de-Bulgarize them, thousands and thousands of these so-called Macedonian Bulgarians were tortured, imprisoned, killed, and quite literally thrown into Lake Prispa by the thousands for the simple crime of resisting this new so-called ethnic Macedonian identity from the period of January 7th to the 9th. Now, the total number killed is admittedly a point of strong contention between Bulgarian historians, with the number ranging anywhere from about 1,200 to anywhere near the number killed in the last Avengers Infinity Wars movie. So, what exactly happened here? That's a great question. Let's dive right in. You're watching Mariusz History Talks. I'm Mario Rostovsky, and we have a great show for you this evening. Towards the beginning of 1945, the end of World War II was finally in sight, and as such, the Yugoslav partisans planned to march to the Sirmian front, the final blow to purge the Nazi invader of northern Yugoslavia. Macedonian partisans, of course, were to be included in this offensive. Now, at the same time, from the period of January 6th to the 8th, Skopje held the Second Congress of the National Liberation Union of the Youth of Macedonia, with over 1,000 delegates in attendance from all across divided Macedonia, as well as the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. Keep this fact in mind. Now, with this going on the morning of January 7th, a military protest was held by Macedonian soldiers protesting the actual decision to march on the Sirmian front. They marched from their headquarters at the Skopskoto Kale fortress down to present-day Macedonia Square, and they shouted things like, "To Solon we go, not Berlin," and "United Macedonia." Now, here's actually eyewitness testimony from Mitko Toshev, a 22-year-old participant back in the day of this rebellion. Later in life, he testified, "We paraded from the artillery brigade, from Kale fortress down towards the railway station, and we shouted, 'We're not going to the Sirmian front, but to Solon.' I was a young man then, 22 years old. I was an idealist. I saw that these people were also for Macedonia, and I too am a Macedonian in my soul." Pretty poignant. Now, there is some evidence that these soldiers were actually spurred to act by the careless remarks of 3 Serbian soldiers as well, who were commenting that once Macedonia is freed, the monarchy will come back in Yugoslavia and essentially reconquer them. Now, either way, whichever way you spin it, whatever caused this, it was still caused by very strong pro-Macedonia patriotism and nationalism above all else. Now, when the troops actually got to Macedonia Square, they were told there by General Mihailo Apostolski, commander of the main headquarters of the People's Liberation Army, as well as the partisan detachments of Macedonia, to essentially go back to the fortress. So this matter can be discussed in more depth there. He essentially told them to stand back down. Why would Apostolski say this? Well, this is something that many Macedonian patriots online, I hate to say this, and they're thumping their chests and saying we should have gone to Solon, not Srem. They get this all wrong. To have invaded Greece, an allied country, would have been nothing short of suicide for Macedonians and their movement. Here's what General Apostolski actually said about this. "May God strike down who did not want Macedonia to be whole. But do you know what would have happened if we had gone to Solon? Then we would have lost Macedonia altogether." Now, this feeling is also shared by Vera Atseva, a Macedonian partisan and the participant in the People's Liberation struggle against the Bulgarian and German fascist occupiers, who, among other accomplishments, was actually awarded the People's Hero Award by Yugoslavia. She said, "At the time when Yugoslavia had not yet been fully liberated and the war had not yet fully ended, if we had gone to Solon, it would have meant that we'd have to face off with the Allies on whose side we have been fighting with up until now." Now, that's the first thing. Secondly, could we actually have dealt with the Greek army, which was very well armed because the British had already been there, and their soldiers in total amounted anywhere from 800,000 to 1,000,000 soldiers when we only had 100,000 soldiers and maybe 10 to 20 machine guns? You tell me. Me personally, I don't think this could have happened. But anyway, what was the actual result of this rebellion? Were thousands of Macedonians just taken to Macedonia Square and told by Tempon Kolishevsky, "Hoćeš na solom? Evo ti ga," and then just summarily executed at point-blank range? Absolutely not. In fact, on the actual Kolede, which is January 6th, do you know how many people were actually executed? 0. In fact, out of the initial protesters, only 38 were actually given a later court date and initially disarmed. And then it was actually the 3 Serbian officers, as well as the commander of the 1st Division of the Artillery Brigade, who were actually even given a death sentence. And this was January 31st, weeks after the initial protest. And guess what? Most of these sentences were not even carried out. Many of them got lowered sentences, if not outright release in the months and years to follow. So again, no Macedonians were actually killed on Christmas Eve, nor even on Christmas Day. But Gingibi has a whole article on Wikipedia called The Bloody Christmas of 1945 to convince you of just that. And remember that whole international congress being hosted in Skopje with delegates from across the United States and the Soviet Union there? Gingibi actually wants you to believe that all these executions happened in front of literally over 1,000 high-ranking international military personnel and witnesses, none of whom actually wrote of such an event. But hey, I'm sure that this must have just slipped through the noses of the Wikipedia editors, right? So, what actually then happened after the so not really bloody and not really Christmas of 1945? Were thousands of Bulgarians just mowed down across the Macedonian countryside and thrown into Lake Prespa by the hundreds? Well, according to the ever-reputable sources on Wikipedia, which just so happens to cite research by a Bulgarian working for the propaganda think tank called the Macedonian Scientific Institute in Sofia, not important, but from the period of 1945 to 1947, some 4,700 Macedonian Bulgarians were massacred or went missing, and as a result of this, some 100,000 were deported, displaced, or imprisoned in Yugoslav concentration camps. That's right, folks, Yugoslav concentration camps with over 100,000 Macedonians. Alexa, what was the population in Macedonia in the late 1940s?
The population of Macedonians, according to the 1948 census, is 789,603.
Oh, that's right. Now, despite this, though, among the more mentioned events concerning this whole bloody Christmas phenomena was relating to the 53 Macedonians killed in Velес for their resistance to the Yugoslavization policies of the Macedonians. Well, not only did this occur on January 15th, a whole 2 weeks after the initial Christmas holiday, but this group was actually imprisoned by Macedonian partisans and back in 1944 for their collaboration with the German and Bulgarian fascist occupying armies. You may say, well, no big deal. Let's go over some of their victimless crimes. This is the same group that betrayed Strašo Pinjur and Mircea Acev to the Bulgarians, both of whom were partisans and were tortured for days on end before being finally executed. In other parts of this group, they took part in the molesting and the beheading of a Macedonian partisan teenager named Nevena Georgieva Dunya. But no big deal, right? Now, in the months to follow the initial incident on the Skopje Kale, some incidents did occur in Štip, Kumanovo, and Resen. In some instances, like in Štip, they were once again protesting the decision to march on Sirmia, while in others like Kumanovo and Resen, we did also see execution of prisoners by Macedonian partisans with the specific crime of collaborating with the Bulgarian fascist occupiers. Now, were some innocent Macedonians caught up in all this and executed as well? Absolutely. And I hate to say this, but it's true. War is a very messy time, and some were caught up in all this. But was this anywhere near the number of 1,200 killed, 900 just thrown off the Kale fortress, and then 23,000 Bulgarians killed and thrown into the lakes? Absolutely not. Even Bulgarian historians like Stefan Dichev, they state that the 1,200 number is nothing more than unfounded speculation, not even deserving of a comment. So again, what exactly was this not so bloody, not really Christmas all about? Well, in a word, it's an attempt by Bulgarian revisionists to take a protest by ardent Macedonian patriots fighting for the unification of Macedonia above all else, and then twist it, contort it, and bend it, and try to connect it to these various extrajudicial killings of Macedonian fascist allies in Macedonia, all of whom undoubtedly caused considerable harm to the Macedonians as a whole, and then try to pass this off as a massive anti-Bulgarian purge. And what's perhaps most troubling here is many Macedonians fall for this. Many Macedonians seek to reject the legacy of Yugoslavia as a whole, as harmful to the Macedonian identity. They'll go out and say they're honoring the victims of communism by honoring the Bloody Christmas Massacre, apparently. And they get caught up in all this, and they don't know that they're actually falling prey to Bulgarian propaganda. And it's honestly this new group of Macedonians that both tries to reject the Yugoslav movement, tries to reject the Bulgarian idea for Macedonia altogether, and they try to create this new conservative traditional movement that attempts to rehabilitate and reinstate controversial figures and events into our history and start celebrating them. It's this group that ends up supporting these watered down versions of historical events without understanding the context, without understanding the facts, that consequently does draw them closer to Bulgarophilia, just like the Bloody Christmas incident. Now, don't take me wrong, I am no fan of communism nor of any Serbian imperialist influence whatsoever. But does my rejection of these two ideologies want me to reject my ethnic Macedonian identity, to own the commies and the Serbs? Absolutely not. That's exactly the path the Bulgars online want you to follow. They know you're mostly anti-communist. They know you're anti-Serbian. They want you to take that sentiment that you have and essentially say, well, I'm both of those things. So honestly, I'm Bulgarian. Ethnic Macedonian identity is a creation of communism and Serbianism. That is absolute nonsense. And it's stuff like the Bloody Christmas Massacre that confounds the understanding and makes you end up supporting these ideologies that bring you closer to the Bulgarian idea. Our job is not to fall victim to these. We gotta start researching more. We gotta start looking at events from multiple angles. Sure, some things may make you uncomfortable. That's fine, but you cannot just pass it off altogether. And do us all a favor, remove the word Bloody Christmas out of your vocabulary. Like I said before, it wasn't actually bloody. It wasn't even really on Christmas. So remove that out of your vocabulary. Research it further. Let me know if you have any kind of questions. I'm going to get to work researching myself on the next episode here. I'll be posting this on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so give us a follow there if you haven't already. I'm going to see you again soon. If you have any additional questions, feel free to send me a message. But in the meantime, stay safe and keep fighting for Macedonia. Until next time, folks.